So you just submitted your designs to a client, you got feedback, and they hated it. What do you do? Well, that happened to me in a recent project, and so in today's video, I want to dive into that, talk through how I worked with a client to reach an outcome that they loved, and ultimately showed the behind-the-scenes process of how all of that worked and how I think through situations and work through things like that. I'll show you my Figma file, the designs, and all the good stuff that goes in with that. So if that sounds like something interesting to you, stick around. We're going to talk about it in the video. Thanks so much for being here. Hit that like and subscribe button. Let's get into it. Okay, so to start off, I want to give you guys a little bit more context into what exactly this project is, because we can't go into this raw dog without any sort of information. So first off, this client was named Diner, and ultimately this is a startup that connects restaurants with secret shoppers to help them improve their service, test new menu items, and compare across different locations. So they're really trying to elevate restaurants and improve different things. Guests give their dining experience, and it is able to then elevate everything else around it. The next up is context. So this is not the first interaction with this client that I've had. This is actually, I helped them build their MVP from 0 to 1, launch it, and then start to acquire users. And so my main part of this was to help them build out their mobile app for their guest experience. And it's been live now for a few months. And there is a major issue that has started to show up within these first few months of being live. So the key problem that they're seeing right now is guests are going and completing what they call dines, which is that secret shopping experience. But ultimately, the feedback that guests are giving is not up to the level that this company wants. And so we're trying to address that problem. We know it can be better, but it's not where it needs to be. And so to help solve this, the company came to me with a proposed solution that they want to implement because they've seen this be successful in other places. They want to implement that themselves. So they basically want to bring in a dine score to show the diner how they are performing in each one of these experiences and dines that they go do. So they want to be able to show a score for an individual dine, and they want to show an overall score that reflects the combined dines all together. And so on the surface, it seems like a pretty simple ask, right? We implement some scores, we do some things, but there's a lot more that goes into this. And so I really wanted to uncover and dive deeper into how we can make this experience better. And so just to give you the TLDR here, without going fully in depth into this brief of what the client sent, I'll give you kind of their snapshot into what we're trying to accomplish with these scores, and I'll kind of show you the designs and things like that that we're starting off and that we're working from. So the core requirements are we want to be able to surface dine scores in 3 different locations: a preview card, a detail screen, and a guest profile. So each one of these, they kind of gave me what we're working from in the beginning. So the preview card, very similar to how you might see on something like a open table where you have this card, and they were like, hey, we could potentially put a guest score here at the bottom. They prototyped it up in a I believe Figma Make or something of that sort to kind of show their suggestions. And then in the past dine detail view, they show, hey, we want to be able to surface some feedback and more of this chat from our AI. And so they mocked it up in here and said, here's some general ideas of what we're thinking. And then for the guest profile, they said, hey, here's kind of our current state of the profile page and some of the things that we want to be able to surface. We have not actually been able to implement the design that you did previously for this, so we're kind of working with this hack together solution, so work off that. The next up is we want this to be simple, readable scoring. So we want to work based off, a normal scoring system, which is red, yellow, green, We also want to use icons, micro labels, not just colors, right? Something else other than just that. We want to make sure we're accounting for all these different user states. And then a big piece of this is this whole experience and this whole project has an AI component to it where the diner is texting back and forth with an AI bot about their experience, answering questions, doing all that good stuff. And so ultimately, we need to be able to surface like, hey, what did that AI bot say about the kind of feedback that this diner gave? So we need to be able to support that stuff. And then profile level insights and some education nuggets about what a dine score means. And so, like I said, like that is why I was like, hey, there's a lot more meat to this than probably meets the surface. Because initially the client was like, hey, we have a pretty lightweight ask. Shouldn't take too long, right? And I've been in it long enough where I'm like, hey, it's probably going to be a lot more meat to it. So let's dive into that a little bit more. So when we're getting into this, some of the things that I'm asking right out the gate before we even get this kicked off and started is, things to ask them about, which is like, hey, what is the level of priority these guest scores need to take across that experience, right? Like, are we wanting these to be a high priority? Do you want them to be a lower priority? Are there things that, compete? Do we expect the scores to be expanding? Is there going to be ever evolving better and better and better? Or this is kind of like, hey, this is our first run out the gate. I have some hypothesis around these in the beginning, but things I like to get understanding of. Is there anything that you want to completely stray away from in scores? Is surfacing things going to be different depending on the person? What do these mean to each person? What does success look like if we implement this scoring system? I feel like I have an idea of this one specifically, but like I want to get a gauge of what they feel. And so because I'm not working full time for this client, this is fractional work. We just get to work, right? We get a lightweight answers back and we get to work, right? So I start off going through this and say, okay, like let's figure out what's some general inspiration. Like what are some scores looking, right? Like once I got all these questions answered, like, what's some ideas for scoring that we could potentially work through and try to understand that better. And because ultimately we still kind of have these constraints of sticking within a red, yellow, green kind of space, we didn't get too crazy. I first wanted to align on the structure of how this score was before even like diving deep into the visuals. And so I just started to think about that thing a little bit more and ultimately got to this point where I was like, hey, before we dive further, like let's just get a gauge of how they feel about the kind of structure of building these scores into more than just a score, but more they have this adjective tied to them, right? And how we could fit in some of these trendings and additional context if we want to add some more meat to these scores. Or if we just want to ultimately keep them cut and dry and just put them in a different style. And just playing around with some of those early concepts, the baseline scores, sub-variations, like just highlighting some early concepts to really get the client thinking like, hey, is this the direction you even want to head before we really flush through these things? And so we started off by doing that and sent that over to the client for feedback. And you can even kind of see like these early level concepts in context of what other things we were working on. So we have them in the cards here that we showed earlier. So after somebody has completed a dine, we also have these cards, right? It says, hey, these dines were completed. We're kind of showing examples of these early concepts, right? Of like how we could surface these scores in a, past booking details, how we could elevate them from the chat bots, how we could bring them in a different kind of stylization, how we could make them expandable or contracting, right? Like we're not spending a crazy amount of time on, really fleshing out everything right now. We're really just trying to get some early level concepts to get their feedback. So we submit it, a few days go by, and then we get the feedback. And they like some of it, they hate half of it. So basically the general feedback is we love the direction, but we hate the way the scoring looks. It makes me think of my credit score. And I don't want to be going in there like I'm going into Rocket Mortgage or Rocket Money, and it feels so sterile and not playful and fun. And like, we want this to be a fun, playful, engaging piece. And how do we do that? That's what the feedback was. And so, I think all in all these years in the industry, I've learned you don't necessarily get emotionally invested in these things, but rather you try to uncover, okay, what really is it that is on the cusp? Like, what are they trying to get at with the root of this thing? And so I was like, okay, more playful. Let's play. Let's build off this. Let's like work through some of this experience of playfulness, right? And so I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, okay, what is playful to it? It's a place in the food and the restaurant industry. I'm thinking food. I'm thinking, okay, what's playful when it comes to what's playful when it comes to scores, comes to imagery, things of that sort. And in the beginning, they said that they really loved this thing that we implemented into a profile page in the past, right? So in the past, we had these like profile icons where we implemented these. They'd be able to swipe through, see their profile. But so I was like, okay, that we know that they like that playful concept. So what if we start like experimenting around with maybe some fun, ultimately badges, right? Or ribbons to showcase the different surface levels. And I'm like, okay, it's okay. Just like early ideas, like not super, super in depth, but just trying to get some general concepts. And so my brain's like, okay, there's something there. There's something three-dimensional, but maybe we don't want that as literal because we already have some like dine numbers in here with the badges. Like we don't want them to just be duplicates of everything. And so then my brain was like, oh, maybe an empty bowl and there's like a progression thing. And then it's like, well, how do we bring in progression, or like what are badges doing? They 1, 2, 3 stars. I don't know if stars is what we want because that kind of competes with like star rating of a restaurant. And so we kind of ditched that concept a little bit when I was going through. I was like, we don't really want that. Like, it's not quite, we want to stay away from stars. And so I keep playing with it. And with these, I'm like working with, in Figma, there is this cool little piece that is essentially make an image. And so I've been playing with those, trying to work on some iterations of what that could be. And my brain just hit this like, oh shit, aha moment. Like, what is like a really, really basic progression of food? And my brain was like, oh, toast. Like if somebody does a really bad score, to me, it's like almost like being a poor cook, or you got your food served to you really bad. Like somebody fucked it up and burnt the bread, or overcooked your, pasta or something like that. So I'm like, oh, maybe like a toast thing, right? And we could do this progression of a toast, and it kind of gets us where we want, right? And so I was like, okay, that's awesome. Like let's build off this. And so I'm taking these rudimentary things, and my brain's like, okay, how do we work through this, right? Like we need to have this ability to elevate not only the scores to show bad, good, okay. We tell them like how their experience was, but we also need to be able to build off this progression piece and show them. So my brain went down, hey, what if it was bad? And then if it was poor, it was a slightly less burned toast. And then if it's okay, it's like, okay, anybody can make toast that's like not completely roasted. It's just, there's nothing to it. Okay. It's kind of mid. And then good, we could add a slice of butter. Like, hey, that's a pretty solid piece, like toast, nice toast, butter. Excellent. You're adding some avocado on top. Outstanding. You got that poached egg. That's good. And then holy shit, almost nobody gets the 100% perfect, but you got the egg, the broken yolk, the little bit of crema on top, and the caviar, and you kind of progress through this experience of being, better and better and better and better. And then if it's like cooking up your score, we could add in some animations and it bubbles a little bit. And so I'm thinking like, hey, this feels really cool. Like I love this. It's like the creativity's here. It fits in nicely with what we have with the current experience of their current, current profile page. And then it also works if we bring in these cards on the detail view for them, and we can still surface the scores within you know, AI bots feedback. And then even in the cards, like we can, you know, still bring in the numbers. So we're not losing the numbers or excellent or anything. So it kind of works across and it works no matter where it is. And it's kind of fun to bring that in, right? Like we're losing the progression, but we're bringing in this playful element. And I'm like, awesome. This is like the one. I'm hyped. I'm excited. And then we send feedback. And it's like, great. We love the creativity. We don't like the toast. And so I'm thinking like, okay, I'll work on some explorations, and I'm continuing to work through this stuff, right? And I'm thinking, okay, great. Like, how do we get them to feel like, what's that next step where they like the idea of the playfulness, but they also want to show the progression, but like, so we're playing with some concepts here, and we send them over. We get a little bit of feedback. Maybe we want to do this taste tester and the progressions here, or maybe we want to do a progression like this. And this, like, the more and more I get into this, the more I'm like, okay, let's wait a moment, let's pause and think like, I'm just thinking like, okay, I give pushback, I reach out to them and I'm like, hey, like, what's the main goal that we started with this entire thing, right? It's to improve the scores, to increase or not improve the scores, but to improve the quality of the dines, to get restaurants better feedback, to elevate everything within the app. And by making these two playful, are we not starting to devalue and remove some of the meat that a score has and the meaning behind it and like the intention? And while the first kind of iterations that we worked through have felt like a credit score almost, like maybe that's the good thing. Like that is probably the best thing that we can do. Like especially early on, like who gives a shit if it's playful in the beginning? Like nothing else matters really if the quality of these things aren't going up. And so my pushback was like, hey, we probably should like find a happy medium between playfulness and very clear intentions. So we did. And so what we ended up landing on was this kind of like punt, if you will, for later, like these really fluffy, detailed 3D renderings of progression scores. And we kind of defaulted to just like, let's just make it clear and have a little bit of emojis that we can play with, has a little bit of playfulness, but like we don't have to go completely extreme with it, right? So we can still be very clear, like we have an overall dine score. And it's very clear, like the number's the focus. The emoji kind of tells a little bit of something about what we think about this. And then the color system is there, right? And we can add in progression into these, but we're very clear on what that is, right? Like it's just a progress bar rather than showing it against all the other possible scorers. And then we still have the ability to add in the variations and put in the past dines, and it works in the global view of past dines, right, on the detail view where you can see where all the details about that experience that you already went through. And on the profile page, it works as well. And so I guess all this to be said, right, like when I work through getting bad feedback from a client, or it is they didn't like the direction at all, they kind of like some of it, they kind of didn't, I really think back and I try to ask a lot of questions. I emotionally detach myself from everything, and I try to get down to the root of like what we were originally solving. And a lot of that comes down to taking a step back, pausing, asking a lot of questions, and making sure that what you started with on the very beginning of the project is still what you're getting to, and that these iterations aren't taking you further away from the mission and the purpose that your entire design was. So that's how, I kind of think through how I worked through a recent one that was, a hated the direction. Eventually we got to an outcome that we liked and are working on implementing that. So, hopefully you found some value in this, just to kind of see a raw behind the scenes of how I worked through a project, some of the iterations that went into that, and, how I kind of just like helped to navigate a client. So hopefully you found value in the video. If you made it to the end of it, you're a trooper. Thanks for being here. Hit the like and subscribe button, and we'll see you next week. Peace.